Hello everyone, my name is Amanda Smith and I will be sharing with you the topic for my senior thesis. So for this year I wanted to discuss the varying effects of abortion in society, primarily in the United States. I've chosen this topic because it is classified as a complex problem or issue. So this is a complex problem because it can't be addressed properly from just one discipline in order to obtain a fuller understanding of a question that somebody may have about abortion. So I've chosen to look at it from 3 different perspectives or disciplines: economics, law enforcement or the enforcement of abortion laws, and psychology. The questions I wanted to ask for this topic were if there were any economic impacts caused by abortion, and if so, are they positive or negative? What effects have laws regarding abortion had on the industry of abortion? And are there any psychological effects on those who participate or go through an abortion? Upon reviewing the literature relevant to the issue, I hope to bring about a better understanding to these specific questions through my research on abortion. So, along with that, I also wanted to bring forth a well-rounded understanding and an unbiased approach on the effects that abortion has on our society and its individuals. This topic is highly significant as of late because pro-life and pro-choice advocates are constantly seen in the media urging changes regarding this issue. One example would be with the recent controversy with Planned Parenthood officials participating in some behaviors that some might consider less than ethical or moral. More specifically, these issues centered around Planned Parenthood selling the body parts or other material from fetal abortions executed in their clinics. The story alone represents why people should take an interest in this topic. So a brief review of abortion history in the U.S. alone would provide enough fuel for any researcher to become completely overwhelmed. There's so many different angles from which to approach the topic that it's almost impossible to know where to begin. Finding the importance within this research topic lies specifically in the complexity of the issue, as well as in an acute need to remain biased throughout the research process in order to avoid joining in on an already much divisive war on women's rights to control their own bodies. Before I begin with this analysis of my research findings, I wanted to discuss a few brief aspects of the history of abortion in the U.S. This review will not be comprehensive, but will rather touch on some of the main points that I have found to be relevant to this process. One article by C. Joffe discusses how the infamous court case Roe v. Wade helped to sculpt the legality of how abortions were conducted in the U.S. up until more recently, as new laws have brought on many more changes. In the early 1970s, a woman known as Jane Roe in court documents sued the district attorney of Dallas County because he enforced a law that specifically banned abortion except in instances where it would save the mother's life. The Supreme Court ruled in Roe's favor on grounds that this law violated her rights under the 14th Amendment. This ruling established the provision of abortion during any time of a woman's pregnancy. Joffe cites evidence that this court ruling helped to dramatically reduce the number of abortions conducted dangerously and illegally, and also cut down on the number of maternal deaths or complications caused by malpracticed abortions. This is seen as a triumph for pro-choice advocates. So fast forward to more recently, during the presidential term of George W. Bush, this article describes the strong pro-life stance held by the Bush administration. Additionally, the far-reaching effects of the abortion conflict can be seen through politicians' use of information to try and derail the institution of abortion under Bush. The political strength of the abortion movement has also led to the evaluation of junk science at its highest level. Official government websites during the George W. Bush years posted false information on the alleged abortion, breast cancer link, and millions of federal dollars were directed to abstinence-only sex education programs and crisis pregnancy centers that promoted numerous falsehoods about the dangers of abortion. Both sides of this conflict have a deeply rooted interest in seeing their efforts towards pro-life or pro-choice pay off. The question of whether or not an interdisciplinary approach can help solve this specific problem is somewhat irrelevant considering just how divided individuals are on the topic and how their stances are not likely to change enough to create a united opinion on the subject. However, my hope is that this research conducted from many different angles can provide individuals with the factual information that they need in order to be more educated and hopefully eliminate bias due to ignorance on the abortion debate. So I'll go over my literature review and the interdisciplinary research. I will first begin with the relevant literature I have found from the perspective of an economic analysis on abortion. An article published by R. Todd Jewell in an academic journal discusses the variation in the demand of abortions among teenage women according to the variation in availability of abortion providers and services that are close in proximity to them. So this article uses the economic model of fertility control as its basis for providing accurate statistical analysis on the issue. This model predicts the overall choice of adult women obtaining an abortion to include the following criterion into the total cost. This criterion would include income, wealth, and time constraints, preferences, the opportunity cost of an additional child, and the cost of abortion services. This finding reinforces the idea that women who have more to lose from having an unwanted pregnancy are more likely to seek out abortion services. The same model evaluated the differences from the same situation encountered by teenage women who consider abortion. The data from this research on teenagers found that although the cost concept reigned true in seeking out abortion services, the type of cost in the concept model were different from this age group of women. Interestingly enough, the data found that a teen with a higher wage, i.e., a higher opportunity cost associated with time out of the labor force to raise a child, is more likely to have an abortion. Additionally, it was also found to be true that teenage women living in poverty were less likely to obtain an abortion. Conversely, this finding reinforces the idea that women who have less to lose from an unwanted pregnancy are more likely to not have an abortion. Finally, this study found that teenage women are much less sensitive than adult women to the changes in the cost of travel to and from an abortion clinic. Conclusions are drawn that if states banned abortion, it would significantly reduce teen abortion rates, but if the number of abortion providers increased, then the number of teens seeking abortions would also increase. This article showcases the effects of supply and demand, as well as opportunity costs of abortion as an economic predictor of the overall behavior of women who will seek out abortion services. Next, an article written by a professor of economics at Wellesley College discusses the economics of fertility when abortion policies come into play. He applies standard economic models to show how one might expect individuals experiencing unwanted pregnancies to react when changes in the overall cost of getting an abortion are affected. The overall cost of an abortion is not merely monetary in its research. It includes monetary, physical, and emotional costs as an overall determinant of seeking out abortions. Based on Levine's research, the conclusion can be drawn that individuals do seem to respond in predictable ways to abortion access, meaning that if the availability of abortion providers increases, so will abortions. But if the availability is reduced or eliminated altogether, then the number of abortions will be drastically reduced, and the use of contraceptive protection against pregnancy will increase. Flaws or holes that I have discovered in this particular author's research are the use of probability and assumptions regarding the behavioral motives and choices that women seeking or not seeking an abortion encounter rather than the use of actual numerical data. So next, from a law enforcement standpoint, I was able to identify 2 relevant articles pertaining to abortion. In a peer-reviewed journal, Coleman and Joyce discussed the effects of implementing the Women's Right to Know Act. The law stated that all abortions that are performed at or past the 16-week mark must be performed in an ambulatory surgical center. This act drastically reduced the number of compliant facilities that are able to perform legal abortions. The resulting effects were dramatic and far-reaching. It reduced the number of abortions drastically, but it also led to an increase in the number of women who traveled out of state to obtain an abortion. According to the research conducted, this act did not impact the number of early abortions prior to 16 weeks of pregnancy. However, the number of abortions at or after 16 weeks gestation fell dramatically, shortly after the time that the Women's Right to Know Act was issued. The flaw that I noticed with this research is that it is state-specific to Texas. The authors state that this research cannot be generalized beyond the state of Texas, although it may be used as a model of similar behavior that could be expected if the same conditions were applied elsewhere. Next, a scholarly article written by Marshall Madoff explores the spillover effects that restrictive abortion laws have on abortion demand, as well as the increase in the overall price of an abortion and legally required services that go along with obtaining an abortion. The results find that enforcement of parental notification laws for teenagers, as well as mandatory counseling, dramatically increase the price charged by abortion clinics. This article shares similar concepts to previous articles from an economic standpoint because it also supports these theories by stating A, the higher the cost, the lower the number of abortions obtained, and B, opportunity costs for each woman affects the likelihood of obtaining an abortion. Here we can find some common ground between economics and law enforcement perspectives. The increase in the costs that abortion providers must now impose on patients due to laws implemented on their practices are deemed as unnecessary. Results of this study additionally show that one possible motive in passing these restrictive abortion laws is to price many women out of the abortion market deliberately. The author's expression of this detail seems to be a flaw in his research simply because this is considered an opinion and not entirely based on fact. Even still, the results found within this study do provide fact-based evidence that the increase in abortion costs in a direct spillover effect linked to the passage of abortion laws. Finally, I will discuss two sources I have located that pertain to the psychology aspect of abortion. In her article, Fingeber explores the psychological ramifications of undergoing an abortion. She attempts to answer the question about whether or not there are immediate negative effects experienced by an individual post-abortion. This has been proven by psychoanalytical theory, but as of yet was inconclusive in its research, essentially stating that it's a theory, not proven fact. Her research follows 5 groups who are administered the same psychological testing in order to determine the level of anxiety or depression that might accompany their abortion. Her research provided a very interesting result, which states that abortion seems to result in immediate relief rather than in anxiety and depression. These results contradict the social myth of motherhood that it is a woman's ultimate function in life to be a good mother, and to disrupt this function would result in psychological distress for all women who undergo an abortion. The flaw in this research is that the author admits that some of the results may have been skewed due to patients discussing experiences or feelings with one another, thereby creating more biased rather than accurate results. The final article I found from a psychological standpoint is an article written by Marita Lask. She discusses the body of research that identifies a correlation between abortions and mental health issues among women. Her paper explores the discrepancies in the idea that abortions are sought out by women who are troubled. At the same time, it seeks out the possibility that these same women may merely be pursuing abortions as their legal right, rather than it being nailed down to a case of a medical condition, for example, depression. The conclusions to Lask's research are surprisingly similar to Fingeber's. Her finding is that women are presented as mentally troubled victims with no capacity to choose abortion, and also states that anti-abortion movement has created a society that correlates mental health problems as something that inevitably happens as a result of abortion. All of this has reportedly been stigmatized in order to restrict women's access to an abortion. Her research is instrumental in showing that the idea that abortion is pathological, for example, brought on by mental illness, has been perpetuated by those who do not support abortions. Additionally, some women may experience circumstantial mild depression due to the stress of having to undergo a minor surgical procedure, but this can be said of anyone having to undergo a surgical procedure, not necessarily just an abortion. The varying aspects of this research and the results produced by it are important in helping me to fill in the holes across all of the disciplinary perspectives found in the author's articles. The research articles, although from different viewpoints and disciplines, shared much of the same results and ideas with one another. It is my personal belief that these similarities encountered by different disciplines help to solidify the accuracy of the results produced by each researcher. The topic of abortion as a whole is highly controversial and most likely will continue to be. This is due to the fact that it deals with individual opinions on the importance of human life, as well as the debate about when exactly human life begins and whether or not a woman has the authority to determine what happens with her pregnancy. These opinions vary widely from person to person and are very personal. Opinions on this topic are tied up in individual rights, religious, moral, and ethical practices as well. Each article I examined brought useful insight into the complex issue of abortion. Both articles, written from an economic standpoint, provided a comprehensive understanding of the various influences that certain factors like age, location, availability, and cost had on women, and whether or not this contributed to their decision to seek an abortion. It was discovered that these variables are directly linked to the likelihood that a woman would or wouldn't look for abortion services. The articles from a law enforcement perspective also proved and demonstrated how the implementation of certain acts and laws affected the supply and demand for abortion services by eliminating them, increasing their costs, or adding stipulations to obtain an abortion which made it more difficult. Although these laws were state-specific, we can use them as an example of what would happen in another state if the same conditions were applied in a similar fashion. Each article written from the disciplinary focus of psychology proved to be very interesting and also contradicted the popular belief that women who seek abortions are suffering from a mental illness such as depression. Both articles determined that it is not necessarily true that a woman must be mentally ill in order to want an abortion and subsequently go through with one. Rather, women seek abortions for a variety of personal reasons, not necessarily linked to anxiety or depression. This complex issue is not one that we can answer for the various reasons I've stated before. Instead, it is one that can be dissected and studied intensively so that a deeper understanding into the issue can be reached. Researchers cannot determine whether or not it is right or wrong for a woman to get an abortion because that is a deeply personal choice, which can be based on any number of factors tied to her life. The closest we can hope to come to an answer is to determine where the line between law and a woman's rights to her own body will be drawn. That concludes my oral presentation for my senior thesis. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed it.